Hello, hello, and welcome to the Profit Loop. Thanks so much for being here, and I can't wait to dive into today's show. This week, I want you to take a minute and imagine a scenario with me. Imagine with me for a minute, a surgical team is in the OR, and they're all looking to the surgeon for what needs to come next. And one of the surgical techs says, "What equipment do you need?" And the surgeon looks at him and he says, "Just bring everything. We'll figure it out as we go along." And so one of the techs goes and gathers everything that they might need, including a scalpel, sutures, clamps, bone saw, gauze, and it's all laid out. And it's taking up a lot of room because they don't need all of those tools. Meanwhile, one of the other techs comes in with his grandmother's sewing kit. Needle, thread, scissors, can sew up a suture, right? Of course not. That would open up the door for malpractice. Yet, most practices are running with this sort of mentality when it comes to running their business. If we haven't met yet, I'm Alisa Conner, and I help both specialty medical practices and professional services businesses grow, not by outspending their competitors, but instead by creating exceptional client and patient experiences that their patients and clients can't wait to talk about. Most practices don't typically lack in tools when it comes to running their business. What they do lack is a diagnosis of what's going on beneath the surface that's causing the problems that the tools that they've invested in are supposed to fix. Typically, when I look at practices, I find 9 areas where revenue is leaking. But when I talk to practices and specifically practice administrators, they usually can only list 1 or 2 places. And that's no fault of their own. They don't know what they don't know. But when there are 9 places that you are leaking revenue on a regular basis, it's no wonder it's harder and harder to compete with private equity companies. Though they have people on their team that every single day, that's their job, is to go find where money is leaking because they're in business to make a profit. What they're not in the business of is making patients feel valued and understood. And so when you can balance fixing the revenue leak problems with also delivering patient experience that propels you above everyone else, you're in a win-win situation. So the next time that you're at a conference or a webinar or even a sales call where somebody's trying to pitch you the next tool to fix your problem, maybe step back, take a deep breath, and question what actually is going on beneath the surface that this tool is going to fix, or will it? And that will stop you from making a decision to invest in something that you may or may not need for your practice. At the end of the day, any tool you invest in isn't going to create an outcome. It's not going to be able to execute a decision. It's just there to do a specific job, whether that's online scheduling or following up with reviews. If there's no system or process underlying that tool, the tool is only going to half fix the problem, if at all. And what I find is that most practices will invest in tools to fix a problem that they think it's going to fix, and only to realize hundreds of thousands of dollars later, it never fixed the problem at all. And that is the unfortunate part about trying to add a tool into the mix of a process that is either non-existent or not optimized. I want to introduce you to a concept that I developed for not only my clients, but also for the practices that work with me in a group setting as well. And the concept is this, that there are 2 kinds of fixes available. It's either front door or full system. And more often than not, when practices go shopping, they're shopping for a front door fix. And once you understand this concept, which we're going to go through in detail with regards to scheduling in just a minute, you're going to see it everywhere. And so I want you to think about how your practice is currently making decisions about solving challenges on the business side. And whether it is a front door, let's fix it quick, get some metrics, get this little, this component working well, or if they're looking at the full system of why things are broken. And more often than not, it's give me something quick and easy to measure and to see success and see results. But those success and results will only go so far if the underlying system isn't fixed along with the solution that you're implementing. So let's dive into scheduling. And scheduling can go one of two ways. You either have somebody on the phone who's answering the phone because there is no online scheduling option available, or you have a form that you want people to fill out. Now, I've talked in multiple episodes about the challenge with either of those options. So if you want further detail on those options, then I will link to some episodes in the show notes and you can go and listen to those episodes. But if you are moving toward a solution that is online scheduling, you could have one of three options. One, patients can self-schedule. Two, you can use some sort of AI option to help them schedule. And three would be that you're sending them offsite to a triage call of some sort where somebody that is live is answering their questions and putting them on the schedule. Now, there are several things that can happen along the way if you're only solving for scheduling. Now, mind you, there are multiple options available to solve the scheduling problem. Most of them work quite well. And you're going to see call rates climb. You're going to see patients served faster and get on the schedule. That's going to solve the friction of scheduling. But what it doesn't solve is the underlying process that goes beyond scheduling. And that is when patients are all thrown into one type of appointment category because people don't know which type to put them in. So they needed a 45-minute consultation. They got a 15-minute consultation. How do you suppose that's going to go for the patient when they show up for 15 minutes and they actually needed to be there for 45 minutes and then they are sent on their way to make another appointment and come back? The other part of this is that most of the time, just generic reminders go out to patients and they can either be missed or ignored or not have the right information inside of them or not be asking the right questions of the patient. So now we have two places where that system is broken. Number one, they should have had a longer appointment. And so now they have to come back and they're frankly pissed off because they didn't want to have to come back. And they thought that this online scheduling was saving them a lot of time. But because there was only one type of appointment, or even if I've seen a lot of times where I'll start to go through the process of scheduling an appointment and it says to choose a provider. I don't know anything about these providers. I can go read a little bit about it, but if I don't know anything about them, I could easily choose the wrong provider. So I come in, maybe I have a 45-minute appointment, but it's with the wrong provider, which leads me back to the same conclusion. I have to book another appointment with the right provider. And then along with that challenge is they're feeling like a number. They're getting the same reminders that everybody else gets. They're not talking about what's specifically going on with that patient. And anytime that you send something generic, it is less likely to be opened than if you send something that it is more specific to the person that is receiving it. In addition, like if people no-show or they cancel, there's typically no process behind following up with those people to get them on the schedule again. And if they don't ever get back on the schedule again, the practice is losing out on that revenue. The other kind of side component to go along with that is that there's no process or system in place for if people cancel at the last minute or don't show up to pull somebody in from a wait list position to one of those appointments. There's usually no process that exists for that. Or if it is, it's like fly by the seat of your pants. Again, part of the scheduling challenge that isn't addressed by any of the scheduling options that I just talked about. So how does that show up? Providers end up running late. And then by midday, the entire schedule is thrown off. They may or may not get a lunch. And in the meantime, everybody's sitting in the waiting room wondering why their appointment wasn't on time. It's because the underlying process for scheduling was never addressed by the tool, which was a scheduling app. All of these other parts of the process were broken or not identified or unoptimized. And so if you don't look at the whole picture, the full system, you're only solving for the front door problem. So let's do what I love to call practice math, lovingly named because it shows practices exactly where they're leaking revenue. So let's take a look at practices from this scheduling viewpoint. If you have 540 newly booked patients because you have this improved system, But then you have 40% of attrition for those scheduled patients because of mismatched scheduling or follow-up gaps or whatever it might be, versus 12% attrition, which is more likely if you have an optimized follow-up system. You will miss out on roughly 216 patients who were originally on the schedule and booked, but then never followed through with treatment. So if we take the 216 patients who never followed through with care, and you're looking at an orthopedic practice average value for a patient who completes surgery or treatment at, say, $6,500 a patient, and you multiply that by the 216 patients, you lose out on $1.4 million every year for a problem that you thought was fixed by investing in a scheduling tool. But the underlying process was never fixed. And so the leakage continued to happen. That's what I mean about by solving a front door problem versus a full system problem. Right now, in orthopedics specifically, and likely with other medical specialties, you have several options that solve this challenge. Some of them are using specifically AI, and they put people through a series of questions and then get them booked onto a calendar. Or you may have the patient filter directly to a human who answers the same questions through an app, and then they move those people out of being on hold, out of going to the ER, and into some sort of option to see a provider. And they are good at what they do, and they are seeing success with that. But what you won't see from any of those options is what happens after that patient is scheduled. How many people fall off? How many people that go through the triage process are never seen by the office where they were scheduled? How many people go to a different provider? How many people cancel that appointment and go self-schedule with someone else because of a referral from a friend, whatever it might be? And this isn't to throw those companies under the bus, because what they're measuring is exactly what their product says it will do. But what it doesn't look at is the process that's causing the problem to begin with. And that's because the metrics that they're wanting to measure are easy to measure. Do we have more people call in? Do we have more people book? Those are things that are easy to measure. Yes, you did. But how many of those patients continued on the journey to become either long-term patients or go through with complete treatment? Most organizations aren't measuring that at all. And as we just talked about, that's where you have a significant amount of revenue falling through the cracks on an annual basis. And this isn't just me touting, random information for you as we talk about these processes. If you actually go and look at the statistics around these software solutions, they barely move the needle when it comes to patient retention and patients moving forward with their scheduled appointments. It moves from 63 to 66%. That's a 3% difference for a huge investment into a piece of software that's supposed to change everything for your practice. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't invest in some of these apps. In fact, I think some of them are pretty great and will solve challenges, but they weren't built to solve all of your challenges. And that would be impossible because your practice is unique just as everyone else's is. You have unique challenges, and you likely have unique processes that need to be evaluated and looked at so that you can improve or optimize them. And so at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you have a regular receptionist answering the phone or a chat bot or online scheduling or a combination of all of those things. If your patients are waiting in the waiting room and your doctors are overwhelmed and they can't have lunch, or your follow-up with patients who fall out of the system is non-existent, you're still leaking revenue and you're still losing patients along the way. And more importantly, your patient experience is going down, 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 and it's making it harder and harder for you to compete with other practices that have their ducks in a row. And this isn't the only tool that's available to practices. I mean, you can go to a conference and see tools galore. You've got tools that help you with medical billing. You've got tools that help with intake. You've got EMR and EMH software that help physicians move through their appointments more quickly and to put all of the patient data into one centralized location. You've got follow-up software. You've got all of these different options and tools that sometimes work together, sometimes they don't. That's another challenge for another day. But if the system doesn't exist and the process doesn't exist to make all of those tools seamlessly work back and forth, you're never going to solve the challenges that show up on a daily basis that make your life harder than it needs to be. So instead of just purchasing a tool to solve a problem, I'd beckon you to instead look at the underlying problems and systems for your organization and then see which tools will actually help you improve the system and make it easier for you to do business and for your patients to select, choose, and move through all of those processes with you. So if we go back to the surgical example of at the beginning of this episode, and we look at the surgeon who has every tool laid out in the operating room and ask them, are you going to operate better because you have all these tools? They would immediately look at you like you were crazy. They know exactly which tools they need when they walk into the operating room, and they don't need everything under the sun to be in there. In fact, they would more than likely not want everything under the sun in there. They only want the necessities. More than likely, they don't want any unnecessary tools in there because they're going to get in the way, and it's just one more thing that they have to manage during the operation. Your practice is no different. You don't need more tools. You need to align the tools that you've already invested in with the processes and systems in your practice. And if those processes and systems aren't optimized, then it's no wonder that money is running out of your practice. So I encourage you, specifically with this week's action plan, to do just that. Now, if you tune into this show, you know I always give you an action plan so that you can take steps forward and gain traction on the things we talk about. So this week's action plan is to whip out your handy dandy favorite tool to document, whether that's a spreadsheet or a piece of paper, and create an inventory of every tool you've already invested in, whether it's for medical billing or scheduling or patient follow-up or whatever systems, tools, and even partnerships you've already created. And when I say partnerships, I'm looking at things that you're investing in, like say a marketing team or marketing tactics or even a marketing agency. Those are all investments you're making. So put them on your inventory. Step number 2 is to diagnose each one. Look at them. Are they actually solving the problem that you purchased or invested in it to solve? Or did the fix stop at the front door? In the example of scheduling, did you sure bring in more patients left and right that are getting on the schedule, but then they're falling through the cracks because the scheduling is a mess? Or did you, here's my favorite, set up an online form that has 952 fields for somebody to complete before they get to the appointment time? And in the meantime, your completion rate is 1%? That didn't solve the problem. So do a diagnosis of everything that you poured money into and see if the underlying challenge has really been solved or if it was just a quick win. We're going to do this and it's going to solve all the problems. And then the third step is to look and see if any of these tools are overlapping. Do you have 2 or 3 tools that are doing the same work or trying to fight the same problem? But the reality is that there's an underlying challenge that's happening there. And so it's not being addressed anyway. And an example of this would be you have a marketing team that is doing 2 or 3 activities that are supposed to bring in leads and may or may not be bringing in leads, depending on how those are measured, but they're coming into a leaky bucket. So for example, they're going to a webpage that is a doctor's biography. And it talks all about the doctor, but unfortunately, that doctor is an ankle specialist, and who they needed to see was a shoulder specialist. they're not going to go hunt around on your website and look for the shoulder specialist when you haven't made the path easy or clear for them. So you could be investing in all the Facebook ads in the world or an optimized website or all of those things. But if you're not making that journey easy for the patient to get to where they want to be, perfect example is online scheduling that has you fill out 52 items before you ever see an appointment type. If you don't give them an appointment time within the first couple of clicks, they're out. They're going to your competitors because they are offering that. So if you're looking at the tools you've invested in and 2 or 3 of them are solving the same problem, but none of them are solving the underlying problem, then you have an idea of where you need to start. The audit will tell you exactly what you've invested in, but it's not going to tell you how to fix it. So before you invest in another piece of software or another tool or another tactic, and you sign another contract for something that's supposed to save your practice, I beckon you to take a step back and make sure you're solving the right problem in the first place. And if you aren't able to identify those problems, that's exactly what we do in the free 20-minute triage call that I offer to practices. If that's something that would be helpful for you and your practice, I would love the opportunity to sit down and chat with you. The link to book that call is in the show notes and also pinned comment. On that call, we're going to take a look at your practice. We're going to look at 9 areas to see which of those in your practice specifically is leaking revenue. We won't get to all 9, but I can give you the top 3 that are the biggest challenges for you right now. And then we're going to look at solutions, whether they're processes or people or training. And yes, sometimes software. Sometimes most times it's a combination of all of those things. But you have to have a roadmap in order to know where to start. So instead of just investing in the next best new thing, you have a plan of attack to move you forward and solve the challenges that are really holding up your growth and profitability. So if you want clarity around those leakages and a roadmap to help you move forward, click the link below in the podcast description and also in the show notes, and you can book that call. It's a quick 20-minute call, and you will gain immense insights and value so that you have a plan to walk away and start to make changes. Thanks so much for tuning in with me this week. I appreciate you being here. And if you found value in this episode, I would love for you to share it with someone else. In the meantime, I will see you next week. Take care, be well, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.